question. Hi Kim, due to what I perceive as a sad state of the world, I'm looking for answers in various directions. I often feel frustrated and sometimes downright depressed. I like to see positive change in the world. Your videos indicate that there are answers. How do I find answers? I've been in some way doing inner work the last 20 years or so. Sometimes I'm very satisfied. The problem is that I'm kind of the person that feels that I'm obligated to improve the outer world, and I'm worried that if people focus too much on the inner, the outer world will deteriorate. I don't know if you understand. Well, I don't know either if I understand specifically what you mean, but I certainly see the pattern both in myself and many other spiritual people. Let's start with the first part of the question. I'm looking for answers in various directions. And I often feel frustrated and sometimes depressed because I like to see positive change in the world. How do I find answers? Well, for most people, we start by finding answers through an outer teaching. We grow up in the Western world or in the modern world and we don't hear anything about a spiritual side to life or spiritual teachings. So at some point in our life we find an outer teaching, often a book, website, a guru, whatever it may be. And all of a sudden you have this awakening where you realize there is a spiritual side of life, and you were not told about it as you were growing up, but people have been following a path for thousands of years and you realize you can do the same. So for most people, they follow a certain spiritual teaching for some time. But what is also very common is that after some time you begin to have questions. You begin to maybe see inconsistencies, or you see that there are questions that can't be answered within that teaching. And so you start looking elsewhere. And this is a necessary phase, but there is kind of a, what I see in some people is that they start looking, as the questioner says, I'm looking in various directions. Well, some people go into this phase that I've addressed in one of my breakthrough videos, where they become open, but they become too open. They're looking in too many different directions. And all of a sudden you see conflicting answers out there, inconsistencies between spiritual teachings. You get very confused. And you can even get frustrated. And that's because you've spread yourself too thin. So I'm not saying you should focus on just one teaching. But what I'm saying is you have the two opposite polarities, where some people will find a spiritual teaching, they'll think with the outer mind, I have to stay in this the rest of my life because I found the ultimate teaching. And that's not what I advocate, because you have to be sensitive. For most people, it's in your life plan that you found that first teaching. But it could very well be in your life plan you should find another teaching later. And if you decide with the outer mind, I have to follow this teaching for the rest of my life, then you're going to miss that opportunity. But on the other hand, I also see people who now they spread themselves over everything. They're open to all kinds of things, including conspiracy theories and whatnot, and they end up being very confused and frustrated. So again, you're deciding with the outer mind, I have to look at everything out there because I have to find this ultimate teaching. Whereas it could very well be in your life plan that you found the first teaching, but you find another one or maybe a couple after that, but then you focus on those. So at some point you have to focus on these and not spread yourself too thin. So in other words, how do I find answers? First, look for a teaching that resonates with you. Study that teaching. Be open. Perhaps there's another teaching beyond it, but don't get so open that you think you have to study everything that's out there. But ultimately, of course, the real way to find answers is to find them from within. And what does that mean? Well, I have explained in several videos that we start out, when we were first created as a new being, we start out having a sense of connection to something outside our own minds. We can lose that connection when we go into separation and duality, but when we're spiritual people, we have a sense of connection. And really what we need to do, what is really the essence of the spiritual path, is to expand our sense of connection and our awareness of what are we connected to. And you can describe it in different ways. You can be completely neutral and say we are connected to the one mind because everything is out of the one mind. But more specifically, we have a higher self that exists in the spiritual realm. I call it the I am presence. So that's ultimately where we came from. I explained that the core of our being is the conscious you, which is an extension of the I am presence. But the I am presence is also an extension of spiritual beings that I call the ascended masters. So when we start becoming aware of what we are connected to, we become aware that we have the spiritual self and we have the ascended masters who are our spiritual teachers and guides. And so where do you get answers? Well, ultimately from your higher self and from the ascended masters. The I am present has a vastly broader perspective than you have when you are in embodiment. Because as I've explained, we see the world through the perception filter of our four lower bodies and all these, all these subconscious selves. But the I am presence isn't yet ascended. So ultimately there are some answers you can only get from your ascended teachers and guides. And basically, all of the teachings I've given on my YouTube videos, in my websites, and in the books I published are about helping you attain that connection to your I am presence and the ascended masters. And I actually have a book that came out last year called Connecting with Your Spiritual Teachers. And that could be a place to start if you feel that. Now, the other thing I would say in this question here is the problem is that I'm the kind of person that feels that I'm obligated to improve the outer world. And I'm worried that if people focus too much on their inner, the outer world will deteriorate. And yes, I understand that concern, but it's a catch-22. And I was in that state of mind for years myself. I've seen many other spiritual people be in it. We find a spiritual path. We see, so all of a sudden our perspective on life changes. We see there's a whole different worldview based on the reality that there's a spiritual side to life. And we see that the world is very far from the potential of what it could be. And we feel we are here to help change the world and bring it closer to whatever vision we have. Now, I can see that when I first realized this, my vision was very primitive, and it's certainly been raised and refined since. But nevertheless, we start out having this, epiphany where we see that the world could be higher, and we feel we are here to help it grow. And so we often go into, as I've talked about before, in thinking, oh, the solution is that we convert everybody to our spiritual movement or follow our guru, then the world will change. And this is naive. This is just, I did it myself, but it's just naive. It's a phase we hopefully grow through. Because what it does when we feel this way, it creates tension in us. But the reason why I say that this becomes a catch-22 is that we are focused on the world needs to change. But as the questioner says, I'm worried that if people focus too much on their inner, the outer world will deteriorate. But you see why this becomes a catch-22. Because you are focused on changing the world. Your entire attention is going out there, changing other people, changing the world. But here's the reality of the situation. As spiritual people, we are here to help change the world. We have an individual life plan for how we're going to make a contribution to changing the world. However, the life plan, as I've explained in several videos, I have 2 breakthrough videos about life plan, it has 2 phases. One is what we need to heal and overcome in our own psychology in order to be able to go into the second phase, giving our gift. You cannot give your gift fully until you've resolved enough psychology, the psychology that blocks you from giving gift or even seeing what your gift is. So once you go into focusing on changing the outer world, you don't think you have to look at your own psychology. And that means you're blocking yourself from coming to the point where you could actually make your contribution to changing the outer world. So there isn't necessarily a contradiction between, as he says, I'm worried that if people focus too much on their inner, the outer world will deteriorate. There's no contradiction here. It's just two different phases. So, when I was new to the spiritual path, I was all focused on giving all of these decrees, invoking light from the masters to change the world. That was me looking out. And then in the early 1990s, I started looking in and realizing I needed to focus more on my psychology. So I had years and years where I focused on resolving psychology. I was still doing the outer decrees and stuff, but it was not my main focus anymore. So this is the ingoing phase. We first have to wake up, there's a spiritual path, but then we have to come to a point where now we are going within. We're focused on resolving the psychology in ourselves that are blocking us from really seeing what our gift is. Then when we come to that point, the resolution of psychology, then we can start giving our gift. And here's the simple, the simple way to cut the Gordian knot is, you are worried that if other people, focus too much on their inner, the outer world will deteriorate. But you are worried about other people. That means you're not focusing on the inner. You're not focusing on what you need to resolve in your psychology. Because when you resolve what you need to resolve in your psychology, you're not worried about other people anymore. You're not even seeking to change other people. You don't have this obsessive, compulsive desire to change the world or change other people. You just see, this is my individual contribution that I can make to changing the world. And you are focusing on that. You're not focusing on other people or changing other people. You're not focusing on what should happen, what other people should be doing. You're just focusing on, what can I do? You see, for me, it took me a long time to resolve this because I had my awakening to the need to change the world in the early 1980s when I found the Ascended Master teachings in the Summit Lighthouse. And I got very eager about going and giving all these, we gave sometimes decree sessions of 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, where we decreed very high speed for all of that time. And I did that many of these services I went to, and I was focused on that. And it actually prevented me from looking at my own psychology, because I was so focused on I have to do the outer things. And I was very focused on how the world needs to change. And I thought it was my responsibility to change the entire world. I'd always, even as a child, I had this more global awareness, and many spiritual people do. I actually, years ago, I was reading a book about Lance Armstrong, the American bicyclist who won the Tour de France 7 times before it was exposed that he had been using doping. But anyway, he was writing how he had cancer, and he was in his clinic fighting cancer. And at one point, he started talking to a nurse that he had befriended about what they could do to beat the disease. And she made this remark, Lance, you have gone global. And what she had seen as a nurse dealing with cancer patients was at first they were very focused on themselves, and then they developed this global awareness. Now, what could we do to help others and to defeat the disease and this kind of thing? So what I picked up from this was this going global. And I realized that I had been global my whole life. And I look at many of the spiritual people I met in various spiritual movements. They have also been global their whole lives, because we are born in this lifetime with this awareness. We are here to do something that has global perspective and importance. But the thing is, what I realized is that those years where I was so focused on the big things, first of all, I wasn't looking at my own psychology. But second of all, you were constantly frustrated. You were constantly behind, because what could you do about all these big things? And so, as I said, I had a period where I realized I needed to work on my psychology. I did that for 12 years I was really focused on that. And then I started, as I said, I came to a point where I had resolved enough of the psychology that I could see what was part of my divine plan, my life plan. And I could then go into this phase of giving my gift. And in the beginning, I still had some of that global focus, but gradually over the years that I've been doing this work, I've come to realize and accept I don't have to personally change the entire world. I am not personally responsible for changing the entire world. I'm an individual being. I have an individual life plan. I have an individual gift and individual contribution that I can make. And when I make that contribution, I have done what I'm here to do, and I can feel at peace. And that means I have been able to let go of this obsessive, compulsive desire and focus of changing the whole world. It was as if, and I can see this in the question, that's why I'm bringing it up. The problem is that I'm the kind of person that feels that I'm obligated to improve the outer world. Yes, I felt the same thing, and many spiritual people do. But we're not obligated to change the whole world. We are not responsible for the entire world because of free will. I only resolved this in myself when I worked on free will and came to really understand, I've talked about it in several videos, the importance of free will. And if you feel the same way, if you can recognize the same thing, watch my avatar videos where I talk about this, how we come to Earth to make a positive contribution, where we often get trapped in these unhealthy reactions. And this is one of the unhealthy reactions where we feel responsible for changing everything. But even if we were to do this, it would violate the free will of other people. So that's why I'm saying you have to overcome the obsessive compulsive desire to change the world and say, who am I? What is the potential I have? What is my gift that I can bring forth? And then I focus on that, and I'm at peace with that. I have made my contribution, and I'm still making my contribution to change the world, and that's enough for me. That's what we all have to come to, that point. Instead of having this deficit approach that it's never enough, we have never done enough because the world still hasn't changed. But by us giving our individual contribution, we have changed the world because we have changed the equation. And that's why, as I also say in several videos, we have to get away from this. We have to achieve outer results. We're here to raise consciousness, to raise the collective consciousness. And I've talked in one video about the interdependent originations. That's a concept from Buddhism. And that's what I also call the collective consciousness. Everything is part of the collective consciousness. And everything that's happening on the earth is a result of where the collective consciousness is at. And what we're really here to do is to raise the collective consciousness. And when we resolve our own psychology first, then focus on our individual gift, we are shifting the equation of the collective consciousness, even if we don't see specific outer results of it. And that's ultimately what we're here to do. And therefore, when we realize that, we can be at peace with being here.